I know yesterday I took a lot of video at John Heinz, but I don't think I really talked that much about the national parks or even what we learned. It was more immersing myself in the visual that was all around me than it was anything else. I thought what was really interesting about John Heinz was it was a wildlife refuge that's just literally on the edge of the city. And so there's this big industrial place next door. You see the airport, like when we were out on the bridge in the middle of everything. I know that you could see not only the wildlife, like the birds and stuff, but off in the distance there were small buildings and like streets and cars going by. But I think it's probably a good thing that this place exists as a wildlife refuge because it actually provides animals with like a sanctuary that's by the city, and I don't really think there's that many places around here that are like that. A lot of industrial places tend to be built by waterways, and so like a lot of the natural waterways and stuff around tend to get destroyed. I guess some other issues that are of concern for John Heinz as a wildlife refuge would have to be not only its location to the city, but also introduction of invasive species, which we didn't really talk too much about, but there were signs that were posted that were talking about spraying herbicides to get rid of these, like, invasive plants like purple loosestrife. There are like a lot of invasive species that, because there's no real predators for them, they tend to get into these areas and overgrow everything and basically wipe out the wild populations, which is kind of the reason why we have these wildlife refuges, is so that there's a place to preserve the nature. These natural wildlife refuge places are set up to preserve like the actual native species of the place, but you also have all these native species, well, introduced species all the time coming in and basically overwhelming the native stuff. And these things are probably a big concern for national wildlife refuges because, like I said, they're spraying herbicides and you can't really have a selective herbicide, so they're probably taking out some of the natural shrubbery along with these invasive plants. It's like, where do you draw the line between preserving something and just going in guns blazing, I guess? Not really sure how to address the issue of invasive species, or even some of the other problems. I know one of the other things that really bothered me when we were there is we were in a national wildlife refuge, but the place was covered with trash in some areas, like especially like around the parking lot. There were some trash cans that had a bunch of garbage, like not even on the inside of them, but just like lining the outside of the can. And it's like, you should really bother to pick that kind of stuff up. It's something that, like, you can't really help. If people are going to go into these areas, how do you make sure that they're not bringing their own trash? I guess one thing that maybe you could do, which would require like a lot of policing of the area, is to just make sure that people don't bring like these bottles into the wildlife refuge. But I kind of think that's a little extreme, and people should be able to police themselves. I don't know why, but people just tend to be pigs a lot of times and just throw their trash wherever they want. It's surprising that that even happens at a wildlife refuge, which is something that's supposed to be there to preserve the nature. So I guess that would be like the biggest change that I'd like to see, but I don't know what actions exactly I could take to end that sort of thing.